Good morning, Mr. Mayor.
Hi.
Thank you. It seems a little bit strange, isn't it, that £15 is too much, but £12.50 is just right. And do you not agree, Mr. Mayor, that £12.50 will probably hit those least able to afford it? How do you make that add up?
Well, it's quite simple, really. The congestion charge applies to all vehicles, basically, with some very, very minor exceptions. The ultra-low emission zone applies to a minority of vehicles, those that aren't compliant. In other words, Euro 6 or Euro 4, depending on what sort of fuel that's being used. At the moment, we know the most latest figures we have is 87% of vehicles that come into the central London ULEZ are compliant, 87%, versus congestion charge vehicles that come into central London. Many of them pay the charge because very few of them are exempt. That's the big difference.
But you have acknowledged, in fact, even yesterday, you acknowledged that it's going to be those people who are less able to afford the charge that are going to be the ones that are hit by the charge. How do you square that with your socialist beliefs?
Well, it's one of the reasons why we've been lobbying the government for some time for a national diesel scrappage scheme. It begs the question, why do poor people living in Birmingham get support from the government but not poor people in London? Why do poor people in Bath get support from the government but not poor people in London? I'm quite clear, the issue of air quality is an issue of social justice. The reality is the poorest Londoners, least likely to own a car, who suffer the worst quality air. In the expanded ultra-low emission zone, in other words, in inner London, 6 out of 10 Londoners don't own a car because they're poor Londoners, but they suffer the consequences of the poor air quality generated largely by polluting vehicles.
Yeah, well, as I think you've been reminded before, it's not for us to answer questions from you, but I'll happily answer the question as to why people in Bath and Birmingham get a better deal from the government. Perhaps they've got a mayor who's better at negotiating than yourself. All I will say, though, Mr. Mayor, is that you're going to hit poor people. You've actually identified that, well, your solution, of course, is for them to just go out and buy another car. Well, do you honestly think that people who can't afford to pay £12.50 are going to be able to afford to buy a new car? Or is it perhaps, Mr. Mayor, a case of, as there's no bread, let them eat cake?
So I think the points you're making are points why we've been lobbying the government for a national diesel scrappage scheme to help those who still need their car and can't afford to make the conversion required, and they can't, for good reasons, give up their vehicle altogether. We're keen to encourage more and more people to not have polluting vehicles. The polluter pay principles is what I subscribe to. If you have a vehicle that's emitting nitrogen dioxide, nitrogen oxide, particulate matter, and carbon emissions, and you're causing children to have stunted lungs, adults have a whole host of health issues, from asthma to cancer to heart disease, you should be aware of the consequences of what you're doing. And if you're unwilling to change your car or give up your car, pay extra. Now, what we're saying to the government is, we recognise there are some particularly poor Londoners, some disabled Londoners, some small businesses, micro businesses, some charities who may need assistance. In the absence of government support, we've managed to find £56 million. We could find even more if there weren't big strings attached to the deal with the government. If it's the case that you're saying that the reason why the government's done a better deal with Bath and Birmingham is because their respective mayors and leaders are better negotiators than us, then I'm more than happy to take up your advice and ask them how they negotiated it. What I'm not willing to do is join the Conservative Party to get a better deal for London.
Mr. Mayor, we wouldn't have you, but thank you very much indeed.